Darrin, Zach, we're just catching up off camera a little bit on the Masters. Any takeaways, Darrin? Your hot takes for that?
Well, as I was saying to you earlier, I am a giant fan of Scotty Scheffler, so it was hard not for me to root for him, and he didn't disappoint. I think he put on an incredible show. I was going to tell you, and I'll tell you real quickly. I watched a video of him when he was showing his distance control skills, where
Mm.
he took his driver out and he said, "I can hit." Yeah, I think he hits his driver carry about 315, 320, and then it rolls out a little bit, but he's like, I'm going to show you how I can control the distance. So I'm going to pick a random number. And he goes, so let's try and hit this 317. And so he hits the ball, and he has a guy out in the GPS with the radio, and he radios back, and he goes 319. Scotty goes, huh? Let me try again.
Not good enough.
Not good enough.
Yeah.
And so he hits it again, and it was almost on the number. And he goes, all right, that's good. And then he went on to his 3-wood, same demonstration. He just went through his bag. It's just incredible how talented they are, and he especially. I mean, there's a reason he's number one. But that was a great show. I was really happy for him. He seems like a
Insane.
really, really, really nice man. Happy
Awesome.
that he won. Yeah.
Glad that your weekend went well for you. I know that some of us are coming off of disappointing brackets, either in the women's
Mm.
tournament, NCAA, or the men's. Myself, a Wolfpack. I went down to Phoenix. Didn't have the outcome I wanted to for the
Oh yeah.
NC State team, but it is the season for performance and who can perform. So I'm joined here for those of you joining live. So thank you so much for joining. For those of you on a recorded version later on after the fact, I'm here with CMMC advisor Darrin Lord of Bulletproof, and from the Axcient side, our own Zack Fay, GRC Analyst. And we're here to dive into the weighty topic of CMMC, NIST, frameworks, compliance, and what the business outcomes and what the experience is like for folks going through this journey, which I know is top of mind for a lot of folks. So again, as a reminder, you're here in the MSP Experience Lounge. Kick your feet up. You've worked hard all short week so far, probably all weekend for a lot of you. Kick your feet up, get a tea, get a coffee, get something that you want to drink, and just join us in this conversation. And we really just want to dive in and understand kind of on the ground, person by person, how this works out. So Darrin, a little bit of a just simple recap of your journey with Bulletproof, with CMMC compliance, and really just the business opportunities that you've been chasing.
Okay, so I started working in the CMMC space, which for those that don't, I'm sure, just to be clear, it's cybersecurity maturity model certification framework that the Department of Defense has established for what they call the DIB, which is the Defense Industrial Base, that are going to in the next year have to, in most cases, have to comply with, and it's a framework based on the controls that Zach is very familiar with from NIST 800-171 for what's called level 2 in that framework. So I started years ago when CMMC came out as version 1, and I was working with some very, very large organizations trying to help the industry, the ecosystem of contractors understand, okay, what am I going to be required to do and how do I do that? And so we've been developing consulting services and basically support capabilities to help organizations get ready to be able to meet that compliance requirement. So I've been doing that for a long time, not a long time, but maybe 4 years now. So with Bulletproof, I'm the senior business advisor helping our organization, the organizations we work with, get ready for that. And in this case, it's CMMC version 2. It's definitely more mature than it was in version 1, because version 1 just basically got pulled back, and then they said, all right, we got to reset, and then they came out with version 2. Now version 2 is the real deal, and it's an intense journey. I'll just say that, for organizations, and there's thousands and thousands of them that are trying to figure out how to get through that journey. So we're here. We try to help.
Excellent. And to set the table for the viewers and everything, as we just use CMMC, we're probably going to be talking about version 2 throughout the conversation, unless noted
Yeah.
otherwise. I know version 1, not to say it's softballs or anything, but and then version 3 probably out of scope for what we're covering. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think you're referring to the levels. So there's level
Yeah.
1, level 2, and level 3. And level 3 really still has not been defined by the Department of Defense. So it's just level 1 and level 2.
Sorry, levels. Yeah, not versions, but levels. Yeah. So we'll probably be in level 2 going forward. Awesome. And Zach, you have thrilled to have you join us at Axcient, and of course you have prior work with NIST. Just curious, that early journey for you. Kind of how did you get into it? How did that fall in your lap?
Yeah, so basically I did consulting at a company, and we would just help other companies get their SOC 2, their ISO, and sometimes we do NIST 800-171. So that's kind of how it got started. Just helping some people, kind of start that journey for themselves and consulting them with it. And then I joined a company where, we had our SOC 2, we had our ISO, and then we wanted to get our NIST 800-171 certification. And so I got to work with them, and we got to, basically build that program. And, anything that we didn't have from the SOC 2 or ISO, we built up for the NIST.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right. So Darrin, what are you seeing? Like, what are some use cases and or recent developments that you think people are kind of like on the edge of their seat waiting to hear about?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So I think let me talk about the current state. The process that the Department of Defense is going through is when they revealed that this was going to be a requirement. It's really kind of interesting, and it's a little bit of a side story. There was 3 pillars that the DoD had when it came to managing the Department of Defense contracting ecosystem. The last pillar was trust. They wanted to trust them to be really have really good cyber hygiene. And then they learned in a very difficult way that they can't. So, and there's 3 aircraft that are part of that example. There was the Marines Osprey, which I think was built by Boeing, and then there was the F-22 and the F-35, and those were built by Lockheed. And they were in top secret status, and China revealed an absolute duplicate of all 3 of those aircraft. So they were able to hack through the ecosystem. And so that's why CMMC, which is the main reason why it sort of became apparent to the Department of Defense that they can't trust the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base, to have that kind of hygiene. So now they're going to hold them accountable. And that's so that what they did, as I said earlier, they started version 1, and then they pulled back because they realized they just didn't have it figured out, and they reorganized and came out with version 2, and that's the version now. And what they've done on December 26th, 2023, they released what's called a provisional rules public announcement, which is essentially how you're going to have to leverage NIST 800-171, those controls, in order to meet the framework requirements for certification under the CMMC rules. Now, they had 60 days where the public could talk about that and give them their opinions. They now are going, and so that was February 26th when that ended. And now they're essentially adjudicating on that public commentary, and they're going to release a final rule. And we're expecting that to be June or July or August this year.
Coming up.
And then what will happen after that is that it'll go through what's called a codification process. Ultimately, it'll get to the White House and it'll become enacted as a law. And that's the big difference, is that there are standards out there that you can meet for cybersecurity, but this will be an absolute law. And in 2025, contracts are going to have language in there that states, if you've got sensitive information, not top secret information, but just sensitive information, you're going to have to meet the requirements based on this framework.
Right. By the way, are those Chinese copies of the Osprey, the Raptor, are those available on wish.com? Could I get sort of like a knockoff copy?
I don't know.
You might be able to. Okay.
Yeah. There was a really funny documentary, on when, remember, I'm going to age myself. You talked about this earlier. Pepsi used to have this situation. I think it was in the 80s where if you collected tabs, you could get points and you could win something.
Yeah. Oh, and right. Sorry.
And there was the
airplane. The
airplane was one of the ones.
Yeah.
No, it was the one, the Harrier. The Harrier.
The Harrier. It was the Harrier. Yeah. And someone totally won it, and then
won it.
Fine print.
yeah. And then that became a lawsuit. He lost the lawsuit. He never got his plane. But yeah.
I hate to throw shade on marketers or marketing, but that kind of all stems back to that. Okay, incredible. So again, not from my place, obviously, to speculate or prognosticate, but we're talking about defense, and we're talking about rules coming down the pike and things. What are you hearing, or in your opinion, how and where will this spread outside of just like the DIB, defense, DoD, things like that?
Oh yeah, I love that question. That's awesome, Bryce, because right now the Department of Defense, they are estimating about 300,000 contractors are going to have to meet either level 1 or level 2 for CMMC. So that's a lot, but what's happening is, and this has become very clear, is that most federal agencies are going to adopt this. And actually the Department of Homeland Security has already said, we're going to adopt this. So it was actually what the sensitive information I'm referring to, there's there's three things, but to make it simple, there's controlled unclassified information, CUI, and there's federal contracting information, FCI. There's also controlled technical information, CTI. But the point is that all of those they want to protect in a standard, and it used to be very ad hoc. And it was actually Obama that signed an executive order that said we need to get this into a standard process to really protect this sensitive information. And so that's where the idea of CUI protection came along. So there are, I don't know, approximately 430 federal agencies in the U.S. That are almost all of them are most likely going to adopt this CUI protection standard that's based on CMMC.
Right.
So that 300,000 contractors, we believe in the ecosystem that support those contractors, we believe that that's going to be well over 1 million contractors over the next 3 years.
Wow. And
so, yeah, it's really big. And what's really interesting, and probably for a lot of the audience here, is that 300, if we just take the 300,000 today, that's going to grow to Canada. It's going to grow overseas as well, just for the DoD. The approximation is about 70 to 75% of those contractors are classified as SMB. So
right.
those are small, of course, small to mid-sized businesses, and they are, as we all think know, they're the largest consumers of managed services. And so, MSPs are going to play a really big role in helping what we call protecting the warfighter and protecting the United States borders from cyber attack.
100%. I mean, the whole supply chain around defense, around security, as you read, Business Insider articles, all kinds of things, it's fascinating how it is a lot of even individual proprietor shops or small firms or SMBs providing critical components all across the supply chain. And this isn't some, Lockheed Martin just gets everything. And if you're not the MSP down the road from them, you don't have any opportunity or skin in the game potentially. That this is only going to grow and become a bigger part of things.
Yeah, and Bryce, that's the really amazing, the really challenging thing is that and the DoD talks about this in their rules on this, is it flows down. So if you're downstream from Lockheed, you're still going to have to meet these same requirements that Lockheed has to meet. And so, yeah, this is going to be, it's a big lift, and it doesn't have to be that big a lift if you've got third parties helping you, but yeah, it's important. If you want to do business with the Department of Defense going forward, you're going to have to get there. Right.
This is the law of the land. Just a quick check, folks. Please post your questions for Darrin, for Zack, CMMC, NIST, compliance related topics. We're here just to have conversations with folks who have really seen it on the ground, been doing the work, and would love to hear from you and what you got. All right, so to switch gears a bit, I mean, Zack, for your own journey and your own interest, how did it start for you? Was it a project? Was it a role? Was it a certain kind of business function that kind of brought you into this compliance realm?
Into compliance, or do you mean like for NIST specifically?
Yeah, NIST. Yeah, 171.
Honestly, it was just an organizational decision that we made. We had some customers that it would have helped us, secure some more deals. We had our NIST 800-171. Where I was at, we already had our SOC 2 Type 2, and we had our ISO 27001. So really the step from there was to do a gap assessment and figure out, okay, what do we not have that we still need for the NIST 800-171? And I feel like that's probably the biggest step a lot of organizations are going to have to make right off the bat when you decide to do this is first you need to understand how much of a lift is it going to be for you. Like Darrin said, it can be a big lift, but depending on your security posture, it might not be as big of a lift. So I think it's important just to understand, where are you now, and then figure out where do you need to get to be compliant with NIST 800-171 or CMMC to meet all those controls.
And that's we've got a couple questions. I'll get to those in just a second. That's kind of part of the crux of what I want to get to is for those who are hearing about the topic, it's top of mind for a lot of folks, but like entering a new vertical, if you're not familiar with HIPAA or if you're not familiar with GDPR, you want to get into European business, for example, like any kind of new step that you're trying to take as a business, what's that, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like what's that risk reward? What's that sizing of the opportunity versus the level of effort? I don't know, Darrin, do you have experience or just thoughts on that, of kind of what's that breaking point where like, okay, this is not going to be fun to really dive in and learn this, but here's the opportunity that justifies it from a business case perspective?
Again, you're making really, really salient points. If you think about when GDPR came out, a lot of companies, or actually if you think back to Sarbanes-Oxley, probably a better example, a lot of companies were just like, well, I'm going to wait and see. And until the fines started to happen,
you waited too long. Now you're going to see.
Yeah, right.
So you didn't get ahead of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's interesting here is that it's really businesses are putting themselves at a tremendous risk unless they're going to make a decision not to do work with the Department of Defense. Or maybe most federal agencies. If they make that, we're just going to go commercial enterprise, and we're just not going to do it. That's a business decision. But if this is their business, they're already at risk because this is happening now, and so they need to do that. And what is also happening is there's a federal acquisition requirement that the Department of Defense took on board. So it's called DFARS as an acronym. Everything's an acronym in the government. So Defense Federal Acquisition Requirement, and the clause number is 7012. If an organization has that clause in their contract, or if they are downstream from in an ecosystem that requires that, they already need to meet 800-171. They already need to meet basically CMMC level 2, even though it's not a law yet. But that is a contracted law, and they have to. What's different about that is that they don't have to be audited, but they have to self-attest that. So they have to state, this is how many of the controls, and Zack, right? There's 110 in 800-171, right? 110, and then 320 assessment objectives. So it's a lot of cybersecurity work. But you have to test, and you have to have a senior official say, yeah, this is our number. The government is basically doubled the size of their false claims investigation unit. And right now, I know that Boeing's being investigated. Georgia Tech Labs is being investigated by the Department of Justice. Right. Penn State is being investigated. They're basically essentially being sued for false claims against that compliance requirement under the federal acquisition requirement standard. So they're putting teeth into this. So I think that, when you look back at Sarbanes-Oxley, people were waiting. Well, there's two things that are happening now. One, lawsuits. Boeing's, I think the lawsuit's like 51 million or something like that, which is basically they lose that when they trip, right? And so it's nothing for them. But, Georgia Tech, it's a different story.
Right.
But the fact is that it's not just the fact that you can be fined for misleading the government on this and basically making a false claim, but they're making it very, very clear that you will not be able to win a contract if you're not compliant. And the primes are getting all the pressure. So the Lockheeds and the Boeings and the Northrops, they're getting all the pressure to make sure that their downstream ecosystem are compliant with the contract levels they need to meet. And so then your business is in major risk. One, if you're going to do a false claim, and two, if you want to do business with a prime, you're going to have to get there, and you can't wait.
Right.
This is what everyone in the ecosystem will tell you. If you haven't started trying to get compliant with 800-171 NIST, you need a time machine. So you need to go now if this is the work you're in.
So not wait till November and see how this all shakes out.
Correct.
The ship has sailed, the trains that left the station, and better late than never, I guess. I'm not a compliance person.
No, exactly. And you can speed it up. There's ways to make it faster. It's just we got to get there.
Yeah, amazing. All right, let's catch up with some questions. You're just talking about fines, penalties. There's a question about what's the penalty for those failing to measure up to the new regulations. So take your pick, I guess, CMMC, NIST 800-171. I guess there's a whole slew of them, or it's not GDPR. What was the number? Is like a percentage based on the effect of on the company's revenue. I think is a little bit more linear that we could all interpret better. This is, I guess, a lot more complicated in terms of
there's a number of penalties. Yeah. So I mean, if it's a DFARS violation, there's what's called a SPURS number that you put in, which is essentially your supplier attestation for how good you are against the 110 controls in NIST 800-171. The government doesn't really mind if you're not there 100%, but they do mind if you lie about it. And so, and then in that case, they can essentially sue you for a lot. Like I said, Boeing's being sued for 50 million, 53 million. I don't know what the DOG is going to do with Georgia Tech. I'm not sure. And it's really fascinating with Georgia Tech, honestly, because it was just essentially an intern that said, hey, we're good, because they were responsible for one particular pyramid of their technology platform. And he said that meets the standard, and that individual unfortunately was wrong. And the government, the Department of Defense, is essentially reaching out to them and doing spot checks. And when you put a SPURS number in and you sign a contract that has that DFARS requirement, you give permission for the government to have access to your premise. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, they said you're wrong. And you signed off on essentially a number that isn't correct. You're not secure enough, and so I don't know what the result of that will be. It'll probably take another year. I've heard that they're talking about $26,000 fines for every invoice against a PO that had an incorrect attestation.
No, okay.
So I'm not sure. Don't quote me, but that's what one of the people I work with and some of the Washington lawyers that I talk to, that's what they're basically saying. But I haven't seen that in writing.
It's got to be a weird number if you're like, oh, we're going to fine you $50K. That's just too round. Yeah. You have to make it sound. Right. Okay, it's $26,350.
Yeah, exactly.
We've really done the math on this, and this is the impact.
And per invoice, right?
Yeah, right, per invoice. And why always dogpiling on the interns? Like poor interns.
Oh, I know. I feel bad for whoever that individual was, right? I mean,
if you put your compliance and business risk and future in the hands of an intern, that's your fault. That's not their fault.
No, agreed. Yeah, and then the senior official has to sign off on it. I was talking to an organization, they're in the avionics industry, and they want to start doing work with the DoD. And the individual that's doing basically the work they have to do, they're trying to get to level 1, which is 17 controls out of NIST 800-171. Mm-hmm. And it's just to protect federal contracting information. And so I was talking to her, and I said, so how confident are you to talk to your CEO and say, sign your name here and tell the Department of Defense we're good? Just, on a scale of 1 to 10.
Right.
And she goes,
right.
Oh my goodness. She said, I never thought about it that way. And I said, yeah. I said, I mean, that's what we're talking about. And she goes, can you come in and look at it? Yeah, we can come in and look at it.
It's not a joke, right?
Not a joke. Nope.
It hits hard after I filed my taxes, 11:55 last night. Is this really? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, that's funny.
So Zach, we had some questions about overlap of things. I know that, you've covered certain things in prior lives before coming on board with Axcient and other things. I mean, what is your sense of overlap? I mean, you do a project, you gain that confidence. I mean, you dive deep and you check off on all the controls, and you build that confidence. And then as you move on to the next thing, or you encounter others, between SOC 2 and others, what's that journey like? Does it build confidence? Is it just like starting over and like throw the book out because you don't want to miss any step on this next one? I'm curious what that feels like.
Yeah, so like, once you get one of your frameworks and you get audited by it, so say SOC 2 Type 2, and once you have that, you can definitely compare that to if you want to move on to like NIST 800-171 and say, okay, what are we already covering? And kind of just cross-reference that, because there is a lot of controls that are going to line up or be similar. And also, if you're starting both at the same time, it looks like one of those questions kind of mentioned that is, so the SOC 2 is very prescriptive and not descriptive. So you can actually change those controls around by talking with your auditor. So not everybody has these same controls. So I would say kind of align yourself with the NIST 800-171 and then see what you can do with your auditor on the SOC 2 controls to make those match up to like the NIST controls. And that can give you more overlap too. So you can actually kind of help yourself if you're doing it at the same time. Because as long as your SOC 2 controls are meeting like the spirit of the requirements and like those COSO principles, you can actually you have some leniency with changing those controls. Gotcha. So overall, I think, I don't know if it would be like maybe 50%, 60% overlap. I feel like it's hard to put a definite number on that, but there is a significant amount of overlap, I would say. And one of the things that maybe there's not as much overlap is like some of the documentation. So like NIST 800-171, you're required to have a shared responsibility model. SOC 2 doesn't specifically require that. So there can be small things like that where you just want to make sure you have your documents and your policies in a row too, because SOC 2 is less specific about exactly what you need, whereas NIST is a little bit more specific and saying you do need this, like it is a control, it is a requirement.
Yeah, as an MSP, is that what you're saying, that shared responsibility matrix is really from MSP for controls to be inherited by a client?
Yeah, so it would cover whatever security controls you're responsible for, your company, your customers are responsible for, like example, like turning MFA on the accounts, doing access reviews, and it actually even includes your sub-processors and some of your vendors. So what are they doing for you that is also helping? So if you use AWS, you would say they're responsible for the physical security of data centers and just stuff like that. So you've got to cover all three of your bases and say, what is everybody here responsible for in terms of security controls for us all to be secure, for you to be secure using our product?
And ultimately, it's the client that is going to be the one that's held accountable. So that shared responsibility matrix is really, really important, because that has to be tight. They have to be confident in that in order to pass an audit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah.
Awesome. To sort of, by the way, thank you for those, just tuning in. We're talking about CMMC, NIST 800-171 compliance, in the form of MSPs being able to deliver those services and be compliant and really take on that business from someone who's on the ground doing it. And also our GRC analyst here at Axcient, Zack. So Darrin, let's kind of like backtrack a little bit. And so we've talked about the framework, we've talked about the roadmap coming up, the future, the trends, what you're hearing, with your ear to the ground. Okay, so we sort of joked about the trains left the station, but never late than never. Okay, I'm sitting down tomorrow. Shoot, I really need to figure out, is this for me? Is this not for me? Does that business opportunity outweigh the risk and the time that it's going to take to evolve? What are your recommendations? The question is, how would you recommend an MSP scope a CMMC level 2 assessment?
So first of all, it needs obviously leadership buy-in. So if we're talking about an MSP, which I think there's a large portion of the audience, correct? And so that definitely needs leadership to say, do we want to be, let me back up real quickly. So in the provisional rules, which we're highly confident are going to be in the final rule, if you're a service provider, they call it an external service provider, ESP in the documentation. But if you're providing services and you're going to have if you're going to be involved in any part of the handling of sensitive information on behalf of a client, whether you're hosting a tenant or managing a tenant or touching keyboards, then you're going to have to meet the same requirement level in what I call essentially an enclave. So a guardrail portion of the business that says we meet these requirements, and then you have, as Zack pointed out, you have a shared responsibility matrix that just gets inherited for that client, and so that you need executive leadership to say, we want to be in this business as an MSP. We want to support that. What's really fascinating about it, and this is what I tell MSPs, is that you're talking about a very saturated market today, right? There's millions of MSPs out there, but what's going to happen over the next year and a half is that's going to really be distilled down to several hundred providers that say, I want to be in this space. And so you go from a saturated market to a must-have market,
right,
a demand-driven market. And so executive leadership say, yeah, let's do this as a business. There's a number of ways to do this without having to spend a tremendous amount of money. Like, we do a gap assessment for an organization to help them understand this is your current state based on what you need to be in an ideal state for compliance, and then what is that roadmap. And there's a number of documentations that come with that, POAMs and policies and procedure, strategies and system security plans and all that stuff. But the point is, we do that for like I think we charge $19,000 for that for a fixed price, right? So it's not that hard to understand. It's not overly expensive to understand what's my current state, what is my lift to be compliant. And now that lift might be difficult. Most organizations can do it in 12 to 18 months. But if you've got support, it can be as short as 6 months, but it's still time consuming. And that's so starting with the executive leadership saying, this is the business decision, we're going to do this, we're going to support this market. I was in a trade show, just as an example, in San Diego around this. It was called the CMMC Implementation Conference. And a number of individuals came up to me and said, hey, help me understand this. My MSP is not going to go down this path to become CMMC compliant. And I said, well, then most likely you're not going to be able to use them. So it's, like I said, it's a business decision. Do you want to be in this space? I think it's a really smart idea. And I'll give you one example. There's an organization out there. I cherish them. I'm not going to say their name, but they're really, really good in this space. They just named again in the Inc. They're an MSP. They were just named again in the Inc. 5000. I think they're rated 1,000. They had a 400 and something% increase in revenue over the last 18 months in this space. All they do is this, and so it's big. I built a business case for an organization, and I said, I think conservatively you've got a $50 million grab based on how you're structured.
Gotcha. So, I mean, as the marketing guy, I mean, that would kind of be my way to approach it, is not just linearly like, oh, here's a new thing, here's a new compliance standard. We want to be on top of our game. We want to be up to spec. And so then just go do it. I mean, can you market to the contractors? Is your service level, at that level anyway? Is this a good fit vertical for you? And again, not to put words in anyone else's mouth, but I don't think we're here to pitch you on one way or the other. Obviously there's a treasure trove and everything out there, but it's situational. It's dependent on you. What's the core of your business? What is your positioning? What's the best fit? And it could be the case where the juice is not worth the squeeze for certain folks, and there's plenty of other business to be chasing. But hey, now you know more about it. You know everything that goes into it, and at least you made an informed decision and not an uninformed decision, or just like, oh well, I just don't feel like doing that. At least it's you have the background.
Some companies are making that choice, and and others aren't. Yeah, there's, like you said, there's a treasure trove. It's just a question if you want to make, if you want to pick it up.
Right.
Go after it, there's a lift,
For sure. Yeah. These treasure boxes are heavy, right? Put some muscle into it. All right, let's see. We have some other questions. There's one I'm going to read, and I actually don't know what it means. So we'll see if someone can interpret it. From your perspective, Zach, how does Microsoft 365 GCC grow because of the CMC version 2?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So GCC High is really the one that's probably the more important one. And what's really interesting about that is that, I mean, it's important as well as Azure Gov. And so there's not very many providers out there that can support GCC high. I mean, it's a really a complex effort. Requires, I'm pretty sure, Zack, SOC 2 type, and then also I think FedRAMP, you know, as an MSP. So that's a tough one. One of the things that I advise organizations to look at is, if they want to be an MSP provider, is to find a way, because there are tool sets out there that you can represent and manage that bolt on to Enterprise 365 that doesn't require GCC high and provides the same compliance capabilities for CMMC level 2. But yeah, the GCC high one is a tough one, because that's a hard one to get Microsoft's permission to support. And there are, you know, of course, there are going to be a number of organizations that are leveraging that. What's really, really interesting about the framework is, I mentioned the word enclave earlier in the call. An enclave essentially is just basically guardrailing it so that the only people that are going to be able to have access and see and touch sensitive information in order to meet those CMMC requirements for the contract requirements, you can do that in a separate tenant that is GCC high, and then have the rest of the organization on just an enterprise licensing model. So it's a lot less expensive that way. But the support of that GCC high is really the challenge. So if you can provide them a way to leverage enterprise and bolt on a tool that essentially does what GCC high does, and they don't have to have that license, and then you don't have to have that FedRAMP responsibility. It's a very complex question, by the way. So
sounds like it. Yeah. So it's almost like layers.
It's a complex answer.
Yeah. Right. No one said this was going to be easy. So
yeah. I mean, there's an answer to this, and there's a way to do this, but the GCC high thing is certainly it's a really good question. It's a significant element, but there's a number of ways to do this and to be able to support an organization as an MSP and not have to support GCC high. Just going to have to convince the client to do that.
Right. So it kind of piques my interest I mean, clearly you have a very particular viewpoint, which is highly valued, Darrin, but and Zack, yourself as well. But you know, where does this is only going to get harder before it gets easier, right? Like we throw CMCC out, NIST, other things. Like, is this just going to continue to be things? I mean, as a marketer, we work with, you know, privacy policies in California. You know, first it was obviously GDPR, then Canada, now California. Now California's thing is rolling out other places as well. So, you know, again, not to use a crystal ball, we can't just make up the future, but do you think it's kind of going to solidify around some of these main frameworks and get deeper, or in your experience over time, you know, went all the way back to Sarbanes-Oxley and others, does it just kind of like pop out of, you know, needs? It's like, oh, SEC wants this thing and DOD wants this thing. And I guess what's your take on the future of compliance?
Well, I'll Zack, maybe you can talk to this, but so if we look at just CMMC for a moment, we're looking at 800-171 special publication version 2, and they're just about to release version 3, right? I believe it's coming almost tomorrow. I mean, it's really close. And so that's going to adjust the CMMC model, because they're going to try, at least this is what the Department of Defense has been telling us, is that they're going to try and just stay, you know, parallel to that. They're not going to necessarily require, even if version 3 comes out, which I think I think they already have provisional publication on that, I believe. So for the NIST 800-171 version 3, but that's going to adjust CMMC, so that's going to be an alteration to it. And so that's going to change everything in the ecosystem, how you get educated, how you get certified, you know, what you have to meet. So over time. So that's just one quick example of how this is going to be an evolution all the time. I don't think it's ever going to be static. And I think what is going to be static is that they're committed to accountability, and they're committed to what they define as sensitive information.
Okay.
And so but the framework is going to be, they're committed to NIST today, CMMC is, and then as that moves into all the other federal agencies, it's going to be very, very, very similar. If you look at Canada as an example of this, Canada has their own cybersecurity maturity model, essentially. They're adopting CMMC. So for Canadian organizations that want to do business with the Canadian Department of Defense, they're going to basically have to be, they're going to have to meet the CMMC requirement. That's coming. If you're a Canadian organization doing business with the United States Department of Defense, you already are going to have to meet NIST 800-171 most likely. You're going to need to be CMMC level 2 certified with a third-party audit. And so that's just going to grow. And so, but it is going to evolve. And I think what's really important, and Zack can speak to this much better than I can, what is going to make this a living experience, a document that changes, is the fact that the cyber threat is always going to change.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So like NIST 800-171, Rev 3, I think is coming out like this spring. So that's going to be an update to the controls. And so, yeah, that'll affect CMMC level 2. And yeah, I totally agree that I think it's going to keep changing just because technology keeps changing. You know, the threat landscape keeps changing. And so that's why they make these updates and they keep doing the revisions of these frameworks, is that way they can keep us current and, you know, keep organizations and how they're protecting data current. So even just looking at like the new AI framework that recently came out, like that was, you know, came out of a need because we had new technologies coming and we needed to be able to secure data that's going into it. So I think it's the same case for this, is we're going to see new frameworks and updated frameworks as technology and businesses change, and as, you know, we're doing different things with data. And I think it's going to keep evolving. Yeah, I don't really see it all solidifying into like, you know, a few main frameworks, you know, as much as we wish it would be. I feel like it's just going to keep getting new frameworks, updated frameworks, and it's just going to get probably just crazier.
Government's going to make things more complicated rather than simpler. I don't know.
It's crazy, Bryce.
I believe when I see it. I wish they would. Sorry, good.
No, I was going to say they're going to bring more acronyms to the.
Oh, of course, yeah. I wish they would kind of treat it like the spring lineup. You know, or we're going to see more pastel colors with this next update. It feels like you said season 3. You said iteration 3. It's almost like season 3 of like an online game. They're releasing new content, and you know, here's more compliance checklist things you get to do as part of the upload. Amazing. So moving on. I guess I'd just love to understand kind of the change management piece. And so a lot of times in the MSP Experience Lounge, we like to proper feet up, you know, have a bit more of a casual conversation, talk a little bit more like person to person. And so we can deal with controls, with frameworks, with checklists, and all that is super critical and important. And like we said before, it's no joke. But what's the human element like? So my limited experience as marketing, we get frameworks thrown at us of how to treat personal identifiable information, PII, which we 100% absolutely respect and don't buy lists, and we don't do anything we're not supposed to do. But it is a cat and mouse game of the new rules that you're supposed to follow, how we need to take our whole tech stack from a marketing perspective, for example, and really just reinvent it and become compliant, sometimes almost overnight. And so what's that like? You know, Zack, in some of your projects, you've had to really be a change leader and an agent of change. And were folks resistant to it? Were folks, just not understanding? Like, what's the edge, the doing the work versus the winning the hearts and minds of people look like?
Yeah, so I've been in both situations where, it's a very security focused organization. Everybody, knows it's good for us. They know that we need to do that, and they're more than happy to, help and comply. And I've worked with other organizations where it wasn't that they weren't happy to help, but they wanted to know why. You had to kind of explain to them more like, this is important because of X, Y, Z. And so like Darrin said earlier, I think leadership buy-in is probably like the biggest thing you can do in actually having a culture of security at your company, because it kind of reduces some of the roadblocks. You want people to kind of be on your side with things, but you also want to be on their side too. I feel like some practitioners, you got to know how to like work with people. Like in marketing, we're not going to give you some crazy requirements that's going to make it impossible for you to start marketing the product or selling our product. So you kind of have to meet them on that middle ground where, hey, we're meeting our requirements, but we're also understanding like we're a business and we have needs, and you kind of have to like meet in that happy middle. And so I feel like that's probably the toughest thing to balance. But once you have a leadership buy-in and you're working with different departments, and that's another thing too, is to educate people, let them know why this is important. And like if I'm telling you, hey, Bryce, we got to start doing this new thing, it's going to make your team's life a little bit harder, but we're going to generate tons of new leads, and you're going to be able to market to this whole new section of people that we're not marketing to right now. And then just kind of like explain to them like how it's going to benefit just the business. And you're not trying to put roadblocks up. You're trying to help everybody here, and that's why you meet in that middle ground, explain to them why it's important, and just see how you go from there.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead, Darrin.
I can add a little color to that because that was great, Zach, and I agree with you 100%. But what's interesting, we didn't talk about this earlier, but there's when we talk about the 300,000 contractors that are going to have to meet level 1 or level 2, about 80,000 is estimated are going to need to meet level 2. Level 2 for CMMC requires a third-party audit. And then an annual self-attestation with a senior official signing off on that, and then every 3 years another third-party audit. So what they're going to be looking at is the evidence to support. As an auditor, they're going to look at the evidence to support that you've got the policies, you've got the procedures, you've got your security plans. But they're going to say, okay, you've documented this, but show me. And they're going to want to see, like, okay, well, if this is the policy and procedure for an incident, I want to go 4 layers down into your business and understand, does that person know the policy? Do they know where to find the policy? And do they know the procedure? And they have to prove that. And so that is the change management, because you can write all the documentation you want, but if you're not educating the entire organization on how to understand the policies, understand those procedures, and know, that this is critical for us to be a secure organization in the DIB, then you're going to fail an audit. So that's a really, really good question, Bryce, because and there's actually organizations that are starting now that are literally just to help companies go through that transformation, to do the education to their organization, to say, look, this is how you're going to essentially propagate your organization with knowledge and policies and procedures, and how you go through that.
Right. So, yeah. You can solve for the one, and then you can just ignore the change management, the people piece. And guess what's going to happen? What's Drucker's quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast kind of thing. So
that's good.
So that's going to happen. I love the image you gave, Zach, of like, to me, it's just like, you could come to me and just like drop a huge book on the table and say, do this, or you could call me up and, grab a coffee, maybe in the MSP Experience Lounge, and have a conversation. We're trying to move to this level of compliance. We're trying to just get things all ship shape, and just 1,000% difference of how that feels and how the actual work is going to get carried out, depending on how that feels. Amazing. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I hate to pivot and take us in a different direction. I mean, I've learned so much. I think the audience has gotten a ton out of it. Would love to, however, go to the lightning round. So we like to do this again in the spirit and the vibe of the lounge. And so I'm going to ask you just in order. I'll go Derek, Zach. What is your go-to karaoke song, Darrin?
It would have to be Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues. I've yet to sing it, but I tried once. But
I love the conviction. Hit or miss, but that's my only choice.
No, that's the one I want. I've never done karaoke before, but that's the one I want to.
All right. We missed an opportunity. Once I get my audio set up even better here, I think we'll have a karaoke interface here in the lounge. All right, Zach, go to karaoke song.
Love Story by Taylor Swift.
All right.
Yep, probably done that one the most.
That's beautiful.
But I thought you weren't a sports fan.
Yeah, that's true.
Not a Chiefs fan.
She cheated me into sports.
Right. She plays in the NFL, right? I'm pretty sure I heard of her.
I think so, yeah.
All right, let's reverse the order. Zach, first car you ever drove?
2006 Nissan Altima.
Ooh.
Yes, Silver.
That's great. Darrin, first car you ever drove?
I think that was a Chevette diesel.
I feel like I can picture that. I can hear it more than I can picture it, probably.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Darrin, this will be a short question. Mountains or beach? You were coming to us from Florida, from
that is a tough one, though, because I grew up in New England, and so snowboard with my girls, and so I do love the mountains, but I guess I'm a wannabe avid sailor. I'm actually going sailing this in May down in the British Virgin Islands, and so nice. The water brings me probably more joy than the mountains. But
gotcha. Yeah, I mean, we don't make it easy in the lightning round here. You're in or out. Johnny Cash or whatever it is. All right, Zach, mountains or beach?
Yeah, I think hiking's awesome. I've been hiking out in Colorado, climbing some of the mountains out there. Like, it was a great time, but I don't think anything beats hanging out like on Miami Beach, just enjoying myself out there. So I'd pick beach
Yeah.
over mountain.
Nice. All right. Very cool. Yeah. Okay. Zach, dogs or cats?
Oof, that's controversial. I like cats. I still love dogs, but I have like 3 cats. I love my cats. I think they're so much more chill.
Sounds like you've made your choice. Yeah. Love it. All right, Darrin.
I refuse to answer that question.
Next.
It is controversial.
Alrighty. Most unique food you've tried, Darrin?
Oh, I don't. That's a tough one. I don't. What would?
Some spicy ramen.
Yeah, no, it's going to be more unique than that. I mean, I've traveled a lot of the planet. I'm trying to think. What is the most unique food? I think I've had raw everything except horse meat. So I don't know. That's a really
I
tough
love
one.
it. It's like it's like the Monty Burns thing where it's Montgomery Burns in The Simpsons where too many diseases are trying to get through the door at one time.
Right.
And so he's healthy, like he's fit as a fiddle because it's too much. And it's like the funnel is like too wide open. You can't even possibly answer because
I guess it would be alpaca in Peru.
That would be up there.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible.
That sounds pretty good.
Right.
For me, I'd have to say chicken heart, had it at a Brazilian grill.
Oh yeah.
And the taste I thought was pretty good. A little rubbery though.
Yeah. You can clean off a screw of those, like not the most impossible thing to do in the world. So yeah.
I did have a Rocky Mountain oyster a couple years ago.
Incredible. All right, man, those are all good questions. Now I feel like I'm going to fall back on something maybe not as cool. Oh, this is fun. All right, last question. Zach, your favorite city in the world?
Denver. I know I just mentioned that, but I had a really fun time in Denver. I love the mountains out there. I was actually thinking about moving out there.
Ooh.
So I haven't done it yet, but
Hey,
I thought it was a really good time there.
We're all over the place, but Axcient would welcome you to be more in the seat. I don't know. You kind of pitched Miami Beach pretty hard. Like,
I did. I was going to say, I thought it was Miami, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I did.
May want to reconsider. All right, Darrin, favorite city?
Yeah, I'm torn between Dubrovnik in Croatia and Old Town Prague. Those are both two of my favorites.
That was great. All right, we need you back for a just strictly non-business talk, just cities, weird foods, maybe interesting cars that you've driven around the world potentially. Wow, there's a treasure trove here. Amazing. All right, I think that kind of wraps it up. Any last hot takes, anything before I kind of move on?
No, thank you, Bryce. I thought this was great, and thank you.
Oh, it's great conversation. Thank you both. Great. So, Darrin, if folks have more questions about CMMC compliance, you are bulletproof. You're on LinkedIn. You're tagged in this recorded version. They can reach out to you, right?
Absolutely, please do. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn and send messages and questions. And I love this conversation. I talk about it all day long, every day. So
very cool.
Yep.
Likewise, Zach. If folks have questions just about your journey with NIST and other things, they can reach out to you. For my part, we do the MSP Xperience Lounge monthly as a live stream, always around this time. We now have a new series called MSP Game Changers, which I believe is launching, if not now on LinkedIn. We've got it on our YouTube channel with Axcient, so you can search it there. Robert Chiaffi, one of our dear partners, has started a series, and we're going to be launching it every 2 weeks with a new iteration. And his first one is with Wes from Empath about cybersecurity. So MSP Xperience Game Changers is a brand new series, pre-recorded. You can catch every couple of weeks, and that's going to be out. You find it here, as well as tons of other content on the amazing social channels that we have here. So I believe that wraps it up for us for today. Thank you so much, Darrin, Zach. Amazing conversation. Really super enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining.